The Balkans, a highly unstable region in southeastern Europe that has been called the home of many ethnic groups and cultures throughout the millennia. This land has been ruled by several large empires, kingdoms, and tribal groups, whether it be in the form of the glorious Roman Empire, Eastern Rome, the Ottomans, the Bulgars, etc. Within this vast peninsula lies a people group relatively unknown to the common person. A small group, yet divided on the lines of dialectal differences north and south. The highlands of the north holding the Geg Albanians, and the lowlands of the south holding the Tosk Albanians. These differences exist on the basis of the geographic location and the many foreign influences onto the respective culture. However, the Gegs and the Tosks are two parts of the same whole. And with that, we will start at the very beginning. Europe during the Mesolithic period was an interesting place, far different from what we are used to seeing. During this era of human history, the Balkans were inhabited by a people known as the Eastern Hunter-Gatherers. It is unknown what language they spoke. What we do know is that they were lighter-skinned people with brown eyes, carrying frequencies of blue-eyed variants. With the agricultural revolution, where humans began to domesticate plants and animals, came a migration to the Balkans from the Middle East 5,600 years ago. These people are known as Neolithic farmers, and with them came the haplogroups EV13 and JM172, which still exist today. EV13 mainly in Kosovar Albanians, and the J2B haplogroup spreading out amongst all Albanians. The genetics of Europe would change forever, and the final piece of the genetic puzzle of the Albanians would be complete with the beginning of the 3rd millennium BC. In the steppes of the Black Sea emerged a new people. These nomadic people, known as the Indo-Europeans, were among the first people to domesticate the horse and use them to travel. Their language would be the ancestor of the languages now spoken by over 3.2 billion people, consisting of languages like German, Spanish, Hindi, Persian, and even Albanian. These people would spread into the Balkans and mix with the pre-existing populations, bringing a new haplogroup into the region, haplogroup R1b. Their culture would dominate over the pre-Indo-European peoples. As for genetic history, we can conclude the Albanians are culturally Indo-European people, but genetically a Neolithic Near Eastern one. The more controversial piece of the story is the various theories that have emerged about the progenitors to the modern Albanian people. The ancient Egyptians became the Copts, the Anglo-Saxons became the English, the Norse became the Scandinavians, the Latins became the Italians more or less, so on and so forth. Which ancient people group directly led to the birth of the Albanian people? The most widely accepted theory is that the Albanians stem from the Illyrians, a tribal Paleo-Balkanic people inhabiting the Western Balkans. This theory is popular amongst Albanian scholars, and at first it makes sense. The Illyrians were a tribal people, just as the Albanians are, and Albanian folk beliefs can be connected to many Illyrian pagan beliefs, such as the cult of the snake and the cult of the sun. However, the reason this theory is controversial is that the Illyrian languages are barely attested, and it is not known if the Illyrians were one ethnic group, as the ancient Greeks were the ones who gave the name Illyrian to the barbarians who lived north of them. For all we know, Illyrian could have been a general term for the tribes north of the Greeks. Another theory is that the Albanians are a Thracian people, who were another Paleo-Balkanic people related to the Illyrians. What is interesting to note is that many Thracians carried the E haplogroup. This could mean that the Albanians are a hybrid population consisting of a parental Thracian origin that migrated west at some point and intermingled with the Illyrians, adopting many of their customs. Another theory, and one that I am slowly being in favor of after further research, is that the Albanians originate neither from the Illyrians nor Thracians, but instead were separate but related Paleo-Balkanic people whom we will refer to as the Proto-Albanians. These people would have originated in the south-central Balkans, in the ancient kingdom of Dardania, whose people are interestingly enough thought to have been an Illyro-Thracian people, lining up with the prevalence of both Illyrian and Thracian genetics in the Albanian population. They would migrate south towards modern-day Albania sometime after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, and it would begin the Geg-Tosk dialect split sometime after the Christianization. Albanian carries many Latin loanwords from the Roman era, which means that Proto-Albanian must have been spoken somewhere north of the Eurachek line, a line created by Czech historian Konstantin Juracek in order to mark the boundaries of Latin and Greek influence in the ancient Balkan languages, such as Illyrian, Thracian, Dacian, etc., from antiquity to the 4th century AD. Although Albanian contains some ancient Greek loanwords, mainly from the Doric dialect, its extensive list of Latin words must mean that the language originated north of this line. Another interesting thing to note is the sort of triangle that is created when looking at the modern-day city of Niš in Serbia, Štip in Macedonia, and the Shar mountain range of southern Kosovo. A theory about these three places has been brought up by linguist Joachim Matzinger, where he argues that the transformation of the old name of Niš, which was Naissos, and the old name of Štip, Astibos, into their modern-day forms fits into the sound laws of Proto-Albanian. and talks about how the name Shar Mountains could be related to the Albanian word Shar, which means saw. What is important about this is that he compares the Spanish word Sierra, meaning mountain range, to Latin Serra, meaning saw. These changes would have required the speakers of Proto-Albanian to have lived in this area for centuries, and would go on to teach these names to the South Slavs after the migration to the Balkans. Metzinger goes on to talk about the phoneme system of Illyrian and a reconstruction of Proto-Albanian on page 84 of Der Latinisch-Albanische Sprachkontakt und seine Implikationen für die Vogelgeschichte der Albanischen und der Albaner, stating that since there are two fundamentally different phoneme systems between Illyrian and Proto-Albanian, there are also two different languages. On the basis of these facts, it is impossible, even inevitable, to reject the hypothesis that the Albanian language has a linear origin from ancient Illyrian. Rather, Albanian can be seen as a continuant of an independent Old Balkan idiom that is independent of Illyrian, and has ultimately escaped Romanization and Slavicization, and has thus retained its linguistic independence to this day. Of course, the later Slavic migrations in the 7th century AD would also affect the genetics of modern Albanians. However, what is interesting to note is that a map of the modern distribution of Slavic Y-DNA in the forms of haplogroups I2A and R1A reveals that Kosovo, which is over 90% Albanian, contains between 5 to 10% of Slavic Y-DNA, while this percentage is higher in Albania proper. Could this mean that Kosovar Albanians are less Slavicized than Albanians in Albania proper? Just some food for thought. In conclusion, the origin of the Albanian people is, again, highly controversial and very complicated. The majority of scholars agree that the Albanians are Paleo-Balkanic. However, the main point of contention is exactly who the Albanians can claim descendants from. As I've presented in this video, this answer could point to a number of ancient people groups, but the more likely origin is, of course, just a simple descendants from a group we can call the Proto-Albanians, who slowly spread south from their homeland of the ancient region of Dardania towards the coast in Albania. After the Christianization, they would split into the modern dialectal groups of Geg and Tosk, and develop further into the medieval era, where we find the first reference of the Albanian language by an outside source in the form of a Ragusan document from 1285 AD, which reads in Latin, Audivi unam vocem clamantem in monte in lingua albanesca, or, I heard a voice in the crying in the mountains in Albanian. Although keep in mind that the Albanians were mentioned as a people group centuries before this, even forming a principality called the Principality of Arbanon, or Arberia in the Albanian language, in 1190 AD, ruled by Progon and the Progone dynasty. Until further research is done, I do not believe we will ever have a clear and concise answer to the question of who exactly the Albanians are. We can always try to give an answer using linguistic and genetic data, arguably the most reliable form of data in existence.